Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. Hey, Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. Hey, before I get into this podcast, I wanted to, first of all, thank you guys for listening and joining me on another podcast. I've really enjoyed doing this over the last year, and if you remember from my last podcast, I believe it was that, I mentioned that we had passed the 1-year mark, and I totally blew by that and didn't really do anything. So anyways, I'm trying to really see what we can do to grow the podcast this year and try and make it better than it's been before. And for that, I need your help. So one, I need you guys to share this podcast with your friends and family. So if you've really enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoyed the interviews and the people I've been able to bring to the forefront, if you could talk and let people know about maybe your favorite podcast and just send them a link to that. And second off, I want to hear from you guys. So I know I've got a small group of loyal listeners, and I want to hear from you. I want to see who you guys are. I want to hear any comments that you guys have, or maybe you guys have your own ideas of some great guests I could have on the podcast. So if you have any ideas or you just want to say hi, you can send an email to voice@camanocommons.com. That's voice@camanocommons.com. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you very much. All right. Now I want to talk about today's guest. So today I got to speak with Brenna Estrada, who's the owner of Three Brothers Blooms, and she started coming to the farmers market this year, the Camano Commons Farmers Market, for the first time. So I got to meet her through that, and the thing that blew me away about her stand was that she did these beautiful bouquets, and I'm not a big flower person. I don't normally notice flowers that much other than when I'm buying them for my wife. But these bouquets that I was looking at they were drastically more beautiful and well put together compared to any others I've seen before. And it really blew me away with how well they were put together. And so we started talking, and throughout the farmers market and stuff, we would talk a little bit, and then my wife would always pressure me and make sure to get a bouquet to bring it home. So anyways, all that being said, I finally wanted to reach out to her and have her on the podcast to kind of see what was her background, how did she get started in making bouquets, and we also get into what job did she do before starting this and how completely different it was from what it is now. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Brenna Estrada. Hey, Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the owner of Three Brothers Blooms. Welcome to the podcast, Brenna Estrada.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Awesome. Did I get the pronunciation right?
You did.
Oh,
absolutely.
Good. I should have checked that earlier. Awesome. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Brenna.
I live on the southern end of Camano Island. I am happily married, have 3 wonderful boys, 3 dogs. I think we're at 24 chickens now, and a fantastic little flower farm.
Nice. Very cool. So where did you grow up?
I was born in California, and we moved up here when I was around 2 or 3 years old, and I've been in the Lakewood, Marysville area. Went to elementary and high school at Lakewood High School, and then traveled around once I joined the Marine Corps, and here I am back in Camano.
Okay. Nice. So you grew up in Marysville, Arlington area. Then did you go to college, or did you go straight into the Marine Corps?
No. So after high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And for me personally, putting a huge investment into a university when you're really not sure what you want to get out of it didn't seem like the best decision. So I was looking for something that would challenge and fulfill me, a little different change of pace, and figured if I was going to join the military, might as well do the hardest. So join the Marine Corps.
Nice. So was there any connection with family or anything that they had past been in military?
My brother had served in the Marine Corps, so I had known a few recruiters that I had become friends with, and they checked in on me in high school. And yeah, I initially thought I was going to go into the reserves, and they told me that knowing my personality, I wouldn't be satisfied. So might as well go all the way. So I did. I enlisted for 5 years.
Okay. Very cool. And so what kind of drew you to the Marine Corps versus Army or Air Force or other branches?
It was the hardest. For me, it's one of those things I try to never let fear get the best of me. So if something intimidates me or scares me, those are the things I actually try to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And how was, during those 5 years, how was that, the whole, like, I guess, where were you at and how did it all kind of go?
Yeah, so I went to boot camp in South Carolina and did my combat training in North Carolina. And then I did my first school out in Monterey. I was a Russian linguist, so they taught me my language there, I want to say for about a year and a half. And then I went to Texas for my secondary school. And it was peacetime for me, so I didn't deploy overseas for combat.
Okay. And you said you were a Russian linguist, like
Yes.
you knew Russian or you got to learn
No,
Russian?
that was my mission of specialty. My MOS was a Russian cryptologic linguist, so they taught me Russian, and I had the equivalency of a 4-year degree
Okay.
in fluency in reading, writing, and speaking by the time I finished. So it was an intense year for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Have you ever gotten to visit Russia?
I have not. No,
Okay.
It's on my list.
Yeah. That's very cool. It's neat to be able to learn a language and really...
Yeah, it was challenging for me. I think a lot of people, foreign languages come easy, but definitely not for me. But it was a really good experience.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think Russian, I don't know where Russian, I hear varying views on like what the easiest languages are to learn from English, like the closest related and all these things. But Russian, when I look at it, I'm like, I don't understand how you get to where you get.
Yeah, it's a whole different alphabet. The Slavic languages are, I think, a little more challenging. I don't think they're nearly as challenging as I know Chinese Mandarin or Arabic are extremely challenging languages.
Okay.
I knew a little Spanish. I knew a little Italian as a kid. My family's Italian, but Russian was definitely my biggest challenge to take on.
Very cool. Nice. So then when you got out of the Marine Corps, where'd you go from there?
I got an associate's while I was in the Marine Corps, and then when I got out, I had actually planned to go into veterinary medicine.
Okay.
And I did some work in that and was working to get my accreditation. But it was a little different working in the field than I thought it would be. I had a huge passion and love for animals, and I felt like because the work sometimes differed in how I thought the care should be of animals, it seemed to take away a little of that passion. And so I felt like I never wanted to lose that. So I thought maybe I needed to find a different line of work for a career and keep it more a hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think when it comes to, I mean, veterinary school in and of itself is a very, very intense school. And,
Yes.
yeah, and it's one of those jobs, and I grew up and I had a dog and I love the dog, but like it's such, I get the people that love animals, they want to go into that field, but I'm like when you're seeing the animals, whether you're a like more pet veterinarian or if you're like a field one, like your job is so, like the job itself is very intense and
Yes.
like I don't know, it's so much work to get to a career that you're going to have to put in just as much work when you get there. It's not saying that all careers that, you know, pay well, whatever, are easy to get into and then you have a plush job in the end. But I don't know, there's a lot of jobs that you look at the end point of them and you're like, okay, so if you get to this point, like you start doing well, you're not, you know, you're higher up in management, but you're working with people and, but I know a lot of veterinarians. That's such a hard word for
it
me
is.
right now.
It is indeed.
But we have quite a few friends and people in our church and stuff that are that. And I'm like, so wait, you were up at 2 a.m. to go out into a cold field in winter to go help a cow? I'm like, that sounds exhausting and tired and cold.
It is. It's a lot of hard work, and they're definitely not one of the most well-paid professions. It's definitely a calling, I think, like a lot of lines of work. But for me, the hardest part was, you know, people sometimes care for their animals differently, and you come encounter a lot with people who don't necessarily care for them the way they should be, and it can be a little heartbreaking, and there's not much you can do about it. So that was the part that kind of, I just felt like, you know, I think I'm going to be a little too sad. So I decided to keep it more of a hobby. And yeah, but it's an amazing profession, and my hat's definitely off to the veterinarians out there. They are well needed.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and it's one. I think because it's so difficult and the work is hard. One of our friends was talking, and their area used to have, I think, like 5 or 6 for a big chunk of Oregon, or the region. And they're like, we needed probably, at least a few more, if not double that, to really cover it.
Oh, for sure.
But now they're down to like 3 veterinarians for that whole area. And he's just like, he's just always working. Mm-hmm. He's exhausted. They just had a newborn probably like 6 months ago now.
Oh, my goodness.
But like going from 1 to 2 kids. So it's like, that's a big jump.
The sleep struggle. Yeah, it's a lot.
So anyways, yeah, that's been, I'm just like, man, that's such a difficult profession. And
yeah.
So
yeah,
very cool. So then from there, then you got what was your associates in? Just a standard? Or?
It was just associates of the arts. Yeah.
Okay.
I just, they provide great opportunities when you're active duty military and even after with education opportunities. And as I still wasn't exactly sure what I wanted my career to be in, I didn't want to not take advantage of it at all. So yeah, I had some community college credits from Running Start, and I was able to transfer most of them over.
Okay.
To get at least an associate's started. So.
All right. So then where did you go from there?
I actually, when I was talking with my dad, he is retired law enforcement, and was mentioning that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And he had told me that they were hiring at our 911 agency for dispatchers and that I should apply. So kind of on a whim, I put in my application and got a job there.
Okay. So is that anything you had ever really thought about before?
No, never, honestly, not until he mentioned it. Obviously, there's 911 operators out there, but I don't think it just ever occurred to me to want to be one.
Right.
It's an intense testing process, and it's an intense job, and it's not like any other job out there. There's like any first responders. Even on the other end of the radio where we are, there's not holidays per se. There's never downtime. The facility operates 24/7, 365, and every position has to be staffed and at all times. And yeah, it's a pretty intense environment.
Wow. Yeah. And I interviewed Luke Plumbeck, who's a local sheriff deputy.
Yeah.
Get them. But we were talking about that, and he's like, hats off to the people that are the 911 operators, because he's like, we were talking how in today's day and age, like talking on the phone is more and more of a rarity, and you don't get anxiety, but you're just kind of like, it's a phone call, like, and then, but like to have that and know that it's going to be a difficult thing, like something bad is going to happen every time you pick up the phone.
Yes.
He was just like, that is an intense job.
I think there's a lot of mutual respect between, the people we dispatch on the other end of the radio, the firefighters and the officers, and then the dispatch side. And it is hard. I think the call takers, it's one of those things you're dealing with. Really, the 5% worst of the population out there is who we're coming in contact with as far as on the criminal side. But you're also dealing with good people in possibly the worst moment of their life.
Right.
And it's a lot of heartache, and it's a lot of sorrow, and it's, a lot of fear. And it's hard to keep that positive perspective that because all you see are these types of situations and people in these states and these types of people, that's not how the other 95% is.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for first responders on their downtime to get out there with, I call it like the real world, but it's, just the side of the good people to kind of help keep that balance. That there's also light in with a lot of the darkness that they're having to deal with. Right.
Yeah. No, that's definitely something I didn't necessarily think about with that, but just that you're only seeing the bad side of humanity. And so really trying to balance that and making sure you're seeing both sides.
It is, and I think, definitely, especially law enforcement firefighters, that's a calling. It's huge. You're putting all of yourself aside to help complete strangers every shift, and there's a huge risk that you won't make it home. You're taking on these huge burdens and this heartache. So it's not that these people, I think, are some of the most compassionate people in the world to be willing to give their life to the service of others. But when you see all this heartache, you can't really let yourself absorb it, because the human spirit just can't. You can't hold that much.
Right.
You would just break. So you almost have to put up this protective barrier and go from call to call to call to call. And sometimes, some will stick with you, but you have to be able to just kind of immediately let it go, because 2 seconds later you have a new caller on who now needs your help, or a new call you're responding to that now needs your full attention when you feel like you haven't even finished decompressing from the last call. It's a really unique situation for people to find themselves in. So when you have people that can do that for 10, 20 years, it's astounding and it's amazing, and they're absolute heroes in my eyes.
Yeah. So, so that was like, how, I guess, what is that? Like, I guess, it's hard to imagine going into a job that's that high octane for, I don't know how long your guys' shifts are, but probably fairly long, and like day after day. How do you guys work through that and handle that? And
the shifts are usually 8 to 12 hours, I think, on both sides for both dispatchers and law enforcement shifts. But then there's always overtime, or if you're on a big call, or a lot of times, you're staying over for longer shifts. I think who you surround yourself with is a big part of it. Keeping friends and family that understand, the toll it takes on you to be able to help you have that time to decompress. There's a lot of peer support groups now that are coming out that are huge.
Yeah.
I think for a long time it was the norm, as it was even in the military. Just, you don't talk about it. You just keep it in, you just do it, you handle it, and you move on. You don't talk about it, you don't show that it affects you. And I think now there's a lot more understanding and a lot more support for people to really be able to process and handle and release all the things that they're dealing with, which I think is absolutely crucial,
right,
for survival in all aspects.
Yeah, and were those groups and stuff, were those starting when you were while you were still in the dispatch?
Yeah, so I was a dispatcher for 16 years,
Wow.
And it was probably about halfway through my career that you really started to see those peer support groups come out. Both anonymous talk groups for law enforcement officers to call in, a lot more military support. There's a lot more groups out there. It's the 22 veterans every day that commit suicide. It's heartbreaking, and you have a lot of that in the law enforcement community as well. Firefighters, too. I don't think people realize, they're not necessarily dealing with the criminal side, but the tragedy, the medical tragedy, the loss of life, it's heartbreaking on the human spirit. And I think just supporting them and what they do and their service to others is such a huge, important thing. Remembering that they're human, that they have emotions and fragility with all the rest of us, despite their line of work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was talking with Luke about this as well, because I think there's the emotional aspect that they have to deal with and be able to work through, and it sounds like there's some peer groups moving that way to assist with that. But I also feel like for the spouses who have to deal with these situations that are, maybe a erratically angry person, like they're normal and then they're not, and then or just go through mood swings, or like just working with that, living with that day in and day out as well.
It is, and it's hard. And I think that trying to have that understanding and compassion, I think especially for spouses, I think for me being a dispatcher, my husband's law enforcement on the other side is a little easier because I feel like I have a better understanding of it. But especially, for spouses that don't ever see that, don't get to see what happens. And you want to protect them too. It's a lot of darkness. I'm sure most law enforcement first responders don't necessarily want to share that with their spouse because it's heartbreaking. Why have them hurt with you? So you try to protect them as you process what you've heard, what you've seen, what you've dealt with. So I think that can almost feel like a bit of a disconnect, despite the understanding of why. And it can be hard. It definitely creates its own challenges in a marriage. Yeah, for sure.
Is that where you and your husband met then?
Yeah, we met. I was a dispatcher at the time, and he was law enforcement.
Okay, nice. And so he's still in law enforcement then? Is he local, or is he?
City of Everett.
Everett, okay. Nice. How long has he been doing that?
Oh, gosh. 12, 13 years now, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you were with them you were a dispatcher for 16 years. Thank you. That's a long time. But where did you go? So what kind of prompted you eventually to kind of decide that, okay, I think it's time to move on?
I think just honestly who I am as a person just kind of evolved in time. Having kids changed me for sure, especially with my third son. We knew he was going to be the last baby, and you just really want to absorb every moment, and you want to be present, and you really starting to reflect on the world around and how we wanted to raise our kids. And what was most important to us. And I felt like I was becoming more, I don't want to say more of a compassionate person, because I feel I've always been compassionate, which is why I chose being into dispatch and staying there. But for me, it was, I wasn't as able to separate from the calls. I was starting to take more of my work home, I guess you could say, in the sense that the sorrows I dealt with and the heartache, it stuck with me more. And I was finding myself being quieter at home and a little more withdrawn, needing more time by myself to decompress, and just being triggered by sorrow a lot more easily than I used to be.
Yeah.
And so I felt like maybe it was time that I got into something else. It felt like I was leaving my family with an empty cup. Like my cup was being poured out at work with everything I had in me, and by the time I got home, I had nothing left to give.
Right.
And I felt that wasn't really fair for my family.
Yeah. How long were you a dispatcher while still having kids?
So I had my first son. Oh gosh, I've been a dispatcher for 5-ish years, maybe.
Wow.
And I did some part-time with them when they were little. I worked at part-time as dispatch, so I could be home with them some. Yeah, but it's just, and even just the long shifts and being gone from them, but it was more the effect it had on me as a person, I think was the hard part. And I felt like it was time I found a more peaceful profession, and I wasn't sure what it was. And I made a joke when I was at that point with my husband. I said, I need to find a job where I can work with flowers or puppies. And it was, honestly, it was a complete joke at the time, and I never imagined that it would lead me to the path I found. But yeah, something that was definitely full of happiness.
Yeah, very cool. I think it does. Obviously, as we grow up and stuff like that, we change, and we certain things become more real as you have more experiences to link to it. But I do think that like having kids was one of, at least for me and my wife, that was definitely something that made it a lot more. Things were a lot more. The world was a lot scarier, right? Because it's not
Very
just you
different.
and your wife anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more you're looking out for. You can't control them, in every aspect of every life. And we really weren't like helicopter parents, and like we were actually more relaxed then than now, I feel like. But yeah, we went through a point where we actually almost lost our youngest, and that definitely shocked us. And ever since then, like for me, it's like ever since then, like movies that even hint at child passing or something, like I'll start crying.
Yes, no, and I'm the same way. And I think that that's the thing, is that I think for a lot of people, and it's that whole saying, ignorance is bliss. And I know it almost is said in a demeaning way, but I don't believe that at all. I think that it's true in a kind of a good way, in that, it's when people are sheltered from the realities of the darkness, thank heavens, because that's where you want to be. You don't want to know all that awful that is taking place, that is happening, that you're not seeing, because it just makes you hurt.
Right.
But once you've had that experience, and for us, as first responders, you've seen the calls where it happens, or you've experienced it close to home with the loss of a child, it changes everything about the way you look at life. Anything that hints to it, like you said, movies bother me. I can't watch movies with children being hurt. It bothers me too much. And you feel so differently with your own kids and situations, and you realize how much you can't control in life and what happens to them. And every moment seems so much more precious with them, because the reality that it could be anybody, any day, to include your children, that just, that's it. That's their last. And it changes how you live, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is that you were mentioning, just that, like that, the shelter of the, like protecting the kids from knowing everything, all the evil and stuff that goes on in the world, and social media and the internet and everything has just broken that box open. And now kids very young are understanding and experiencing or learning about these terrible things that are happening in other countries or in our country. And they're seeing these things at such a young age before they can really process them. But they're almost being shocked with these things so early on now.
They are, and I think it actually is changing how children grow up, for sure. There was a saying I heard, and I can't remember where I heard it. It was ages ago, but it said childhood is over the moment you learn you're going to die. And I think that so many of our kids now, is almost like there's, I want to say like a 5 to 10 year shift, and that our 13-year-olds are being exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to till their early 20s. And they're dealing with it. They're finding ways, because you do in life.
Right.
But it's forcing them to just, society's so different for our children now with what they're almost becoming numb to, which I think is sorrowful and sad, in the levels of violence and images and just all kinds of things that I feel like children should not only have to know about or process, but for them to find their ways to cope with it and adapt and become numb to it, for me, is just heartbreaking at such young ages.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, talking to other people as well, but it is also like the situations around bullying and things like that. Like, you no longer escape those. You don't go home and you escape those because you're at home and you're safe now. Like, they follow you everywhere because they're always connected.
Yeah, I am so thankful that I went to high school in an age with no social media. I mean, for us, it was the little note you have in class, and you fold it cute and you pass it, and then you burn the original note, and no one knew, and there was no evidence, and the picture was the one little camera picture, the Polaroid, and it's such a different world now for children, and it's heartbreaking, I think, for parents, and it's terrifying. And the best we try to do for our kids is, there's so much you can't control. And I think the best you can do is try to prepare them for it and help them keep a healthy perspective.
Right.
That although high school by all means feels like the entire world when you're in it. And I remember that feeling, that the entire world is outside of it.
Yeah.
And be true to you, and the right people will like you for who you are, and you'll get through it, and you'll get out of high school, and then you make your own life, and it's going to be great, and it's not forever. And I think that's just the best thing we're trying to do for our kids, is let them know, that not everyone's nice, not everyone's great. Stick to who you are and follow what you believe and what you want in life, and after high school, you'll be able to make that life for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very important it's so difficult too, because I think even growing up, I remember there's just different groups of kids. Some kids are able to be okay with themselves and be able to get that self-confidence and just kind of coast through a lot of, even if they get bullied to some degree, like they're able to get through a lot of that much easier. And there's some people that every insult is so difficult for them to get past. I had friends, like I was one of the, and I was homeschooled, so I did have a sheltered group. I had 5 very close friends that we grew up together. And during that, even in that, there's still dynamics and stuff that go on. And we had a fairly big homeschool group community on the island during that time.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was able to work through different things pretty well. And I saw other friends or family that just didn't, and it was a lot harder for them.
Yeah. I think it's important that friends for sure are a huge part of it, but it is, each child I think handles it so differently, and some take it so much to heart.
Yeah.
It's something that they just can't seem to find a way through, and others, they just, by personality, they just slough it off. It doesn't bother them at all. You can't even faze them, but you really can't control, I think, to an extent, the core of your child. They are who they are, and so it's just trying to navigate what helps them best for their own personality type.
Right.
I remember when my son, one of my boys, he was just the sweetest thing, and I remember the first time he ever experienced another child being cruel to him, and he couldn't fathom. It was they were on a playground, but it was so hard for him to wrap his head around why someone would not be nice. Like he was not a cruel kid by nature. He'd never been unkind to anybody. And so his first experience with someone being unkind to him, he couldn't even comprehend why someone would on purpose make someone else feel bad.
Right.
And it kind of makes you ponder on the human race and why we're like that. And, is it a learned behavior? Is it experience? What causes that at such a young age? But, I want to believe that inherently people are kind by nature, and maybe it's life that turns them another way, but regardless, the bullying is definitely a lot more intense in schools now than it was.
Well, and I was just actually talking to a friend of mine about this. The bullying from kids, high school and down, is so different because the cruelty that they will go to in their verbiage and what they say and things is there's no filter.
No.
And so they say these things that, you literally can get arrested for as an adult.
Oh, for sure.
And it's the kids, the other kids have to deal with that,
Yeah, it's shocking to me. It's heartbreaking. I think, I'm a bit old fashioned in my parenting with my boys. We're really big on respect and really big on manners. And we tolerate a lot, but one of the things we don't tolerate is cruelty. And, heaven help my sweet little boys if I find out that they're being cruel to other kids, and we tell them it's one of those things, if you're in a position to stand up for somebody else that can't stand up for themselves and you feel that's what you want to do, we support you in it. You know, it's scary. The bullying, it makes me nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think the other important aspect of that is that relationship with the parents is working through that and, keeping that strong. And I know there's always that balance of like friends, being a friend or a parent. But I think just keeping that relationship open and just continuing to, foster that is definitely
for
important.
sure. Yeah, absolutely agree.
But yeah, very cool. So then, from leaving there, how did you take a break for a while after leaving the dispatcher then?
No, so it's funny. I joked, I need a job with puppies or flowers. And then not much long later, one of my dear friends let me know that Floret Flower in Mount Vernon was hiring seasonally.
Okay.
And at the time, it was just a simple job, assisting them with the holiday. They were really busy. Certainly at that pay level and what was happening, it wasn't something I could have based a career off. But I thought, what if, oh my gosh, what if they meet me and I do a really good job and they want to keep me forever? And so, I talked to my husband because it was a bit difficult for us. I would have had to back off my time at my job that was a good steady income to be able to allow the time to then start part-time somewhere else. And so it was a huge leap of faith that may have gone absolutely nowhere. They certainly didn't talk about having an actual permanent position open, but my husband was extremely supportive and wonderful, and we pulled a lot of strings and got some support from our family, and we were able to make it work so I could get in there seasonally. And I think I actually even said to them that I'm really hoping you'll love me and keep me forever. And so it worked out. It did. They eventually offered me a permanent position, and lo and behold, I got to work with flowers.
Nice. So what was the starting position, and then how did that kind of evolve?
It was just a seasonal position. I assisted with packing seeds and filling orders.
Okay.
And then it was kind of a, hey, do you want to stay on and help us with the greenhouses, with seed sowing and planting and cleaning up around the farm, and eventually led to me being able to be the shop lead, which is where I am now. I assist in customer service, and I am the shop lead.
Okay. So do they have like a retail location there as well then?
It's a closed farm. It's closed to the public, but
Okay.
It's online. So everything we do is online. We have an online shop, and they have some really incredible seeds that we ship out all over the world. So
nice.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Very cool. And how long have you been there?
So it's been about 2 years now that I've been there. Yeah.
Nice. So then how did that lead you? I mean, I can see a lot of connections, obviously, but when did you kind of decide like you were enjoying it enough that you wanted to actually go out on your own and do some of this?
So I had never grown anything from seed before.
Okay.
I started working there, and I honestly didn't even know about the concept of a cutting garden. For me, it was kind of more landscaping, all the stuff I'd ever done with flowers, which I always loved them, but it was always in landscaping. Mm-hmm. So when you cut your tulips and you cut your roses, it's like, well, now your landscaping's bare. So having a bouquet wasn't really something you got from your yard. But then being there and learning all about it, and the idea of a cutting garden, having a garden literally where the sole purpose is to cut flowers and make bouquets, was such an extraordinary thing. And Erin put out, her first book was called Cut Flower Garden, and she goes over everything. I mean, it can take you from absolutely knowing nothing about flowers to not only being able to grow, but being able to actually start a business off of it, all in one book. And it was a kind of a revelation for me, and being in it and seeing it happen on the farm was definitely a huge part. But so I gave it a go last year. It was my first year. Okay. And I bought a bunch of seed packets, and I sowed all my seeds and followed the book religiously. And we gave away all of our blooms last year, just kind of seeing how things went. And my boys showed a lot of interest and asked if we could try a farmer's market the next year. And I thought it'd be a great way for them to kind of learn that balance of you get out what you put in. So working hard in the garden with me and sowing seeds and pulling weeds and harvesting and caring for the flowers to be able to then be personable with people, develop those relationships in the markets and bring in the money and, everything about that seemed like a really great start for them.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and it's a great lesson for kids to kind of see the whole scope of business in a small
Yeah, small scale. So definitely our little flower farm that we have is very much small scale and definitely more of a passion than a source of major income for us. I do it really for the boys to have them have that experience and just because we love it so much.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that's where the name comes around from?
Yeah. I mean, when we first started last year, it was just because of where I was working and seeing all this and wanting to bring it home and wanting to have it in my yard. We did it for fun and it just kind of evolved on its own, really. And my boys being such a huge part of it was a surprise to me. I mean, I hoped they'd enjoy it, but seeing the dynamic in that time, and it's such a wonderful thing just for me being out there in the dirt with your kids and just having these things grow in this beauty and watching their faces. I mean, boys or girls alike, when you see these beautiful flowers and you're smelling these smells, it's such an amazing thing. It just kind of stops time for a moment and just kind of it's grounding and it's a beautiful way to spend time with your kids.
Yeah. Well, and I have to admit, my wife is the gardener and takes care of our yard for the most part. I mow the lawn and that's about it. And the kids are starting to get old enough to do that. So it was one of the things when we were getting married. She's like, I always want to have a farm. And it's like, I don't want to be a farmer.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. I mean, and she just means homegrown farm.
Yeah, absolutely.
For us, but I'm like, I don't like doing that. But she gets out with the kids, and they love doing different projects and different things they try. 2 years ago, I think it was, or maybe it was last year, we got a bunch of sunflower seeds for a just attached to a Christmas gift as an extra thing. And she's like, oh, this will be for the kids. They'll enjoy it. And 3 of our kids didn't they thought it was interesting, but then they got bored of it. But my wife would saved a bunch of the bags that we got. And my youngest is a very busy boy, and he always is running around and doing something. And he's not bad. He just, if he can be taken apart or destroyed, he does on accident, out of happiness, I guess. But my wife was able to give a handful to him, and he would run inside, and she would give him a handful, and then he would go back outside and very carefully plant each sunflower seed.
Aww.
And he did each one, and then later on, they all bloomed and they all grew really large. And my wife was always like, yep, that's my Beamer distraction garden right there.
Oh, how perfect.
So he's really enjoyed that. And they think we homeschool, so everything's, being wrapped up. And
it's a lot of lessons to be learned in growing. Yeah, for sure.
So very cool. So then I'm assuming, so you learned the bouqueting and everything. You learned that from working at Floret and...
Yes and no. So the growing and everything I've learned from at the farm. Floret has transitioned more away from, in the beginning, she did a lot of, obviously they sold flowers at Floret, and they did a lot of workshops and bouquet making instructions and all that. And Erin does still put out a lot of that online. Really wonderful free online resources. Mini video courses that allows flower farmers or aspiring growers all the tools they need to grow. She's incredibly generous with her knowledge and she shares everything she's learned freely, which is really astounding. But for me, with my flower farm, I guess kind of obviously all my growing came from what I've learned through Floret. But with what I put on my Instagram page, for example, and the bouquets that I make, it's really me just trying to share the flowers the way I see them. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about flower farmers is that, yes, we may be growing the same varieties, but every flower farmer is different and everyone makes a bouquet different. It's very much like a painting, in my opinion. No two bouquets are ever going to be the same. No two flower farmers are ever going to have the same exact style because we all see things differently. So I just try to put the bouquets together, photograph my flowers to show people the way I see them. This is the beauty and the way I see it in the flowers, and just kind of try to share that with others. Yeah,
and that was so when we found out you guys signed up for the Camano Farmers Market for the first time this year, and but my sister-in-law and wife were talking, and I was like, oh yeah, we finally have a flower. We've got another flower person coming, because we've had other flower people throughout the years, but it's they only do flowers and they do bouquets, not just we've had some dahlias people and stuff like that. So anyways, I was like, but she this person focuses just on the bouquets and stuff. And then I believe you dropped one off at the marketplace as a kind of like, we're coming to the market. And,
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like it was dropped off when I wasn't down there. And so I was like, wow, who are these for? And they're like, I don't know, some person dropped them off.
Perfect.
So I took them home, gave them to my wife, and she's like, no way, are these the people coming to the farmer's market? I was like, I think so. I mean, I'm assuming so. There's the same name. And she said, oh, I've been following them on Instagram for a while. Like, she makes beautiful bouquets. And anyways, so that they already knew about you guys and your farm before you guys actually showed up. But honestly, it was one of those, you know, I've obviously when you walk in grocery store stuff, you see flowers and bouquets. And then I've gone to farmers markets and stuff. But honestly, like the bouquets that you guys put together are some of the most beautiful that I've ever seen. They're just like so well put together, and everything complements each other. And I'm not a flower person by any means, but every time I see them, I'm like, man, I don't think I've ever seen a bouquet like that.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Honestly, it just, man, does that fill my heart. I feel like I have no musical talent for sure. Definitely not a singer, can't play an instrument. I don't think I'm much of an artist, but for me, this is kind of where my passion and my heart is. And making the bouquets is kind of my way of painting and just trying to share, like I said, the beauty of the flowers the way I see them. So for people to feel that beauty and to see that beauty, I definitely want my flowers to last. You know, I try really carefully to harvest at the right times, make sure that these bouquets bring at least a week's worth of joy. But to hear people say that they have and they enjoy them, it's just, oh my gosh, yeah, couldn't make me happier.
Yeah, no, they really have been. You know, whenever you guys have been at the market, I try and pick one up because I know you guys were out for a couple weeks there, and then I was out as well. Like I was missing Tuesdays, and my wife's like, "Well, why aren't you there on Tuesdays?"
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So then, has that changed? I guess I mean, you've picked this year as your first year to be at markets, and this is the year of COVID, of course.
Yeah.
How has that kind of affected everything?
It hasn't affected us too much. Like our flower farm, again, it's, you know, my main job is at Floret. It's my dream job. I love it. So this is very much a completely separate, just on the side, more for passion, for fun, to give my boys that experience. So everything we do is very small scale. The farmers market was great for us. The community was so supportive and so loving, and we had a lot of really wonderful, loyal customers that we saw every week. So it was great for me, and I think great for the boys too, to see that you develop that relationship with your community. You provide them something that you do your best to give in high quality, and that's a little bit different. And they recognize that, and they come back and support you for it. And so it was nice to teach them those lessons. It's hard, you know, trying to be personable with people with a mask on. I think that was the hardest part because they can't see the smiles, and it's a little harder to interact. But other than that, you know, it's just, we're such a small scale farm. We were still able to really keep up with that. We have people reach out to us for occasion bouquets, which we love, you know, sending us messages through Instagram or emails asking for, hey, you know, my sister has a birthday, or, you know, even condolence bouquets. I remember when I was asked to do my first funeral flowers, and I was surprised. It's not that I didn't know that was out there, but it just, you know, it's like, oh gosh, you know, it's like it brings a whole different value to it. And we had our first wedding this summer that we got to do flowers for. And for us in particular, we want to keep it very small.
Yeah.
I am very careful that everything I put in my bouquets is something I've grown in my garden from seed. I don't outsource flowers. I don't do wholesale. And not that there's anything against that by any means. It's just, for us, with what we're doing, that's kind of our whole goal, is that everything is grown from seed in our garden seasonally. This is what nature provides. This is what the garden is speaking to us.
Yeah.
So it's actually been pretty good this year, even despite COVID, because it's just keeping within the scope of our small garden. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that with everything with around COVID right now, you know, everything has been canceled across the board.
Yes.
And the fact that farmers markets are still allowed to happen, I think we've had our best farmers market year that we've ever had. And it was surprising how, I mean, normally a farmers market, it happens every Tuesday throughout the summer. And I enjoy it, and I'm glad that it's there and it's going. But like this year, I just felt like every time I saw the tents and that there was people around, and it was just a different like, oh, we're not getting this from anywhere else right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even in particular the Camano Farmers Market. I mean, we're a tiny market. There's 7 to 10 vendors on some days, which is so small compared to other markets out there that have hundreds of vendors or 50 vendors. And I've had friends, that do flower markets out at the Arlington Farmers Market, or they'll do Lake Stevens or Everett, and they come to the Camano Market and they all comment on how different it is. It's just a different community and a different feel, and they're so supportive, and you just feel good being there. Everyone's there. It's just, I think we're all just coming together, and especially this year with COVID, like you said, so much has been canceled, but I think the Stanwood Camano community still has kind of that small town, very much support local, shop local, keep it within your community, keep those small businesses going. A lot of fresh, organic, healthy kind of thing. We have a huge artist community on the island, a lot of retirees. And so I think that feeling that we were kind of all still coming together and supporting each other is really important, and a really big kind of reassurance for a lot of people here in the area. Yeah. And I felt that every Tuesday at the market. I felt that. So
yeah, no, and we obviously have some great vendors. We have a lot of great vendors that have come through, and that are that started this year and have been with us for a long time. But like Ananda and Island Harvest, both of them are always just shining lights with where they are, and
absolutely.
So I always go out even if I don't need to buy anything, I'll go out.
Oh, how can you not? Ananda had this giant 5-pound tomato once that I saw calling me from across the market, and I had to buy it. Yeah, they put out amazing food. Yeah, it's beautiful produce.
Very cool. So what do you kind of see the future of Three Brothers Blooms then?
It's kind of I'm willing to take it as it comes. I'm willing to take in all the blessings as are coming our way. I definitely will keep it really the size it is. Mm-hmm. I don't think we'll ever get bigger. I like it being very manageable, being able to really control the quality of what we do, keeping it really small within the community. I've had people ask me if we're going to branch out to other farmers markets on Saturdays and do this and do big weddings. And that's just I don't think that's really our cup of tea.
Yeah.
I think we really like just being as high quality as we can, as true to what we started as we can, true to our passion, and really just keeping it very much within our community and our local area.
Yeah.
As long as the support stays there, we'd love to keep bringing bouquets to everyone around us.
Very cool. All right. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions.
Right.
So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most over the last 3 months?
Oh, probably roses. I keep buying roses. I can't help it. I'll be driving home and this little voice will be like, oh, look, roses, you should stop. And Orchards Nursery gets me all the time because they're right there on my drive home, and they have all the roses lined along the fence. I think I brought home 6 more rose bushes that I still haven't planted because I don't know where to put them. But they bring me so much joy. And so, definitely plants.
Very
for
nice.
Sure.
Very cool. That reminds me of, I used to work at Skagit Farmer Supply as a kid, or in high school. And there was a guy that worked there seasonally, but he would only work so that he could afford to buy seeds. So every time he came in and was leaving from work, you would see him and he had just handfuls of seeds, and he was just like, time to go plant, and would run off. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's that way. I think for, a lot of my friends that do flower farming also, where it may not necessarily be our sole income. And even for some of them where it is, it's as long as you can make enough to live and to keep feeding your garden. If I can keep buying, making enough that I can just plant again next year and plant again next year, I'm good. I don't know any flower farmers that are like, I want to be rich. It's very much, this is what I love. And if I can just make enough to keep doing it every year, I am thrilled.
Yeah.
It's a very joyful kind of place.
Yeah. Very cool. Pretend you have a friend coming from out of town. What would their first day look like here?
Oh, I have had friends come from out of town, and usually the first day starts with your marketplace. Your bakery is, oh my gosh, it is amazing. So usually coffee and bakery, and then to the beach, I think. We have some of the most beautiful beaches out here on Camano. Mm-hmm. So I think it's always best to start a first day visit kind of chilled out at the beach for sure.
Yeah, it's really nice. All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person in this community that I should interview next?
Oh my goodness. I am lucky enough to know a lot of really amazing, fascinating people. Someone I think that deserves even more recognition for sure is Deanna with Twig and Vine in Conway. And she is a fellow flower farmer, but she has started this amazing concept called Growing Kindness. And she has ambassadors, I believe, all over the nation now. And they basically make sure that these gardeners and these growers get free supplies, free bulbs, free seed, teach them the tools, and then they grow flowers for their community. And they just give away free flowers. They give them to patients in hospice. They give them to first responders. They give them to, senior citizens. They give them to food banks. And just seeing that joy and those flowers go out and giving these people these tools to be able to do it is an amazing thing. Yeah. I think more people should definitely know that that's happening.
Very cool. And lastly, if you could have a message on a billboard right as you're driving on the island, what would that say?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. I love our island. I think our island is amazing. I never intend to leave. But for the world in general right now, I think my message I try to put out is just to practice compassion. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people say practice kindness, which I absolutely wholeheartedly agree in. But even a step further, I think, is compassion. Because I think you can be kind to someone without ever trying to give a thought of, okay, why are they different? Why do they think differently? I can still be kind. But to actually practice the compassion of understanding, this person may be just as good of a person as I am and likely is, yet they think so very different. Yeah. And why? And just giving them that respect and that extra compassion of understanding that, no two people have the same life.
Right.
And it is, I think, our tragedies and heartaches and difficulties that lead us to make the choices we make and stand for the things we stand for and believe in what we believe, whether it's the lack of those heartaches or the abundance of those heartaches. But with no two people having the same life experience, it's so unlikely that we're ever going to all be the same in our beliefs. And I think just having the compassion that this person's journey has brought them to this, and it's no less or worse or more or off than your journey that brought you to this, and we're still all in this together, and you can still be just as close to someone who thinks differently with you as long as you see them with a sense of compassion and respect.
Yeah. I think that was beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a great way to end the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. Thank you.
Yep. All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Brenna Estrada for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/EP65. That's CamanoCommons.com/EP65. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.